Welcome back. So, it's only been like maybe a week. It hasn't been like 7 months like before, but I'm back. I figured I would return to a discussion that I had about a week ago. And I would also like to discuss some albums that are going to be dropping tonight because I believe across all genres we are going to get a good amount of quality music tonight. So I wanted to discuss all of these before we kind of dive into when the music's going to drop around midnight. But I wanted to start off with the Vultures one discussion. So I started off when the video released that I was going to revisit this album in a month. Now, I may still do that, but I will say for myself that I have not returned to the album ever since my video dropped. There has been no desire for me to return to it. There has been no kind of tracks that have really stuck with me over this past week. Now, I will preface and say that I did listen to this album about 4 times in a row the day that it dropped. And I feel like for myself, either maybe I'm just burnt out from it, but for me, I feel like it's because I've gotten all that I wanted out of it. I kind of experienced all that it has to offer. So now we look at to the user score. So I use Album of the Year all the time because I feel that it's a really good congregate base of user scores and critic scores. The critic score is a 44. Is it expected for a Kanye release nowadays? Yes, but now the user score is starting to follow suit. So it went from a 72 when I first reviewed it all the way down to a 60. So usually how the album cycle works is that either the first week is going to be filled with massive praise or massive criticism. Usually the second week, it's always going to be the critical side that is going to come out and always drop down scores or drop down the critical consensus of the album that is released on that particular period of time. So dropping from a 72 to a 60 is understandable, especially considering that we do have the major critics and also major publications starting to get at to this album. So I will not be surprised that around probably towards the spring going into the summer, we see this album drop as low as about a 55 when it comes to the score. Now, if we look at the first week album sales, it is projected, this is not confirmed, but it's projected to have sales of 140K in the first week and is expected to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200. Are we surprised? Not really. It's Kanye West. We're still going to see a massive amount of tension around this album, and people are still going to be listening to it. People are still listening to it at this point. For me, I feel like I've kind of steered the course of this album. I'm going to return to it just for video purposes, just to see if it's changed. But for myself now, I've originally gave it a 7. But the more I think about it, the more that maybe I was a little bit too generous. I still like it. I still think that there's some quality tracks on here. But I feel that, again, with this album, there is no staying power of this. So I have dropped it down to a 6. It could even possibly drop down to a 5 if I give it another listen, because the album again is just not really gravitating me all that much. So we will return back to this in a month. Will we get another Vultures? Who knows? But I feel like the firestorm around this album is not the music itself. It's just about the controversy around this album that is now the major discussion. The music has kind of fallen off to the wayside. So we will let the dust settle, and then we will go back to the music when the dust has finally settled. But now let's actually talk about the albums that are going to be dropping tonight. So the biggest one is YEAT with 2093. So this has been talked about around the latter portion of 2023 of last year. And this is probably going to be one of the biggest releases of the year. I am not kidding. It's probably going to. I believe there's features from Lil Wayne and Future and possibly a few others. Drake could possibly be on this album as well. So the last album that dropped was Afterlife, which dropped around actually the exact same time that 2093 is going to be dropping. It sold 55K in first week, and then it has a user score of a 58%. So that is honestly not that surprising for a YEAT project. I will say I feel like it's rather low. I have said numerous times across this channel that I think Afterlife is one of his best projects, and I feel like it's probably his most adventurous and probably his most catchiest and most accessible album that you can get into. It is honestly a great listen, and it kind of grows with me more and more as I listen on with it. And 55K first week for an artist that didn't really have, that kind of grew his own fan base is quite impressive. I may it's going to be a very close race, but there is a possibility as well that he does outsell Kanye West, which would be quite the achievement, and I would be more than happy to celebrate its praises on that front. Now, we'll have to wait and see how the music pans out, but Yeat's come up has been very impressive. I will say that much. So now we get into QUADECA with Scrapyard. So I believe this was just announced maybe about a day or two ago that this was coming out. So it's a collection of all the Scrapyard series from Scrapyard 1 to 3. So I believe there's about 7 or 8 songs that have already been released, but there is 7 additional songs that are going to be added on to make this a full mixtape. So the last album is now considered probably one of the best albums of the decade, with I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, with a user score of an 86. This is folk. The sound of it was a major shift, especially when you consider the last album was more into that YouTuber rap kind of subgenre where it's very hard to get out of it, but QUADECA just completely changed genres and made this folky kind of shoegazy album that did have some hip hop elements to it, but this is a very outsider album. This is very experimental, and it paid off massively because now QUADECA has completely shaven off the YouTuber rap moniker and has now become an artist that I am so interested in. And I believe a new single just dropped, and I listened to it. It's very catchy. And I think with this album, you will get more of a palatable sound when it comes to what I've heard on the Scrapyard series. I haven't heard all of them, but it's going to be probably a mix of I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, but it's going to bring the rap side of it that was introduced on earlier projects. So I think clashing those two together could honestly make this one of the catchiest and most kind of adventurous mixtapes and albums of especially their early years. So definitely look out for QUADECA with Scrapyard. Another one I'm looking forward to is IDLES with Tank. So the last album I honestly have not listened to was Crawler with a 75%. But the other album before this one was Ultra Mono, which is what introduced me to IDLES, who is a UK punk rock band. It's very politically driven. It's a very positive sounding band, to be honest. If you're looking for something that's going to be more of a positive energy, that's going to bring these really cool messages, as well as getting into the more like the nitty gritty of the political side of things, which is a kind of a moniker and kind of the state of what punk is still, you will like this band. And the singles that have dropped with this, I believe one is with Grace with LCD Sound System, and my favorite one is Gift Horse. So if you're looking for a change in genre, if you're looking for some great punk, if you're looking for some great production, if you're looking for some great energy, I definitely recommend at midnight you give Tank a shot. I've been really looking forward to this album ever since the beginning of the year. And then another one that I've been looking forward to the most has been SERPENTWITHFEET with Grip. So the last album that dropped was Deacon, and that had a 68%. So Deacon was probably the most mainstream appealing album that SERPENTWITHFEET has made so far. But the album before that, Soil, is one of my favorite albums of all time. That is one is adventurous. It is weird. It's a mix of R&B, has a lot of like natural instruments. It is a weird album, a kind of this weird obsessive kind of love album that is not like sweet. It's sweet at some parts, but then it gets like stalkerish and kind of menacing at some parts too. This album is daring. This album was experimental. This album really kind of tests you when it comes to the music that you listen to, but I love it to this point. So Deacon was kind of more of a palatable album, still a great album. My favorite track is Amir, and it has an amazing color performance. But if you want to listen to some amazing R&B, I think this album is also going more into a house direction, kind of like a nightclub kind of sound, and SERPENTWITHFEET has one of the best vocals in the game right now. One of my favorite vocalists, honestly, of all time for me. And if you were to listen to this album, you will understand why. And if you go back to Soil, you will see the vocal prowess that SERPENTWITHFEET has is completely unmatched. It's a completely unique voice, and it's something that's going to be captivating me for years to come. So these are all the albums that I'm looking forward to tonight. I'll be doing probably maybe a little video where I do mini reviews of all these albums I discuss, but that's all that we're going to catch up on. So have a good night, listen to some music, enjoy yourself, and have a good rest of your night.